here. November the 4th. November the 4th, 2025, IPS evening deprogram. And what I specifically wanted to talk about tonight is the plane crash today and what appears to be what I'm calling 9/11 code written all over it. So when I first saw the crash, and my presumption here is that these things are not necessarily extraordinary. Accidents happen, so I'm not saying it's unequivocally fake. But then I look at it for any kind of hallmarks of a hoax. Are there any kinds of indicators? Is there an agenda attached to it? I was kind of waiting for the leftists to come out and say it was because of capitalism and greed and deregulation. Probably something along those lines. Maybe an equivalence between the plane crashing and the Titanic sinking. I'm waiting for some kind of narrative to come out. But so far, all we have is the supposed event, the tragic event. So my first thoughts, though, I saw the breaking news and it says flight 2976. So I'm thinking flight 2976. This is a UPS flight. Crashes near Louisville International Airport in Kentucky. So that's the starting point. And my first thought on this thing was, wait a minute. That's the number of 9/11 deaths. So in other words, UPS flight 2976 crashes, and on September 11th, 2001, you had the planes crashing, and this one crashed into part of a building, so it's kind of like the Pentagon thing, and those attacks killed 2,976. So I'm pointing out that the death toll on 9/11 is, connected to this fiery explosion hitting a building on the day that Dick Cheney dies. And when you think of 9/11, you think George W. Bush and you think Dick Cheney. So now I'm thinking, what's going on here? Is this deliberate? So then I'm looking closer and it says it reached 175 feet. And I'm thinking, wait, United Airlines Flight 175 was the second plane. And then you've got the Muhammad Ali Airport. And I'm thinking, wait, Muhammad Atta was the lead 9/11 hijacker. And then, of course, you had that Dearborn, Michigan plot, Muhammad Ali terror plot. Then you have 4 killed, 11 injured. It's 11-4. So 411, 11-4, 175, 2976. What is going on here? Looks like 9/11 code. Somebody said, what do you think this means? And American Father says a nod to Cheney. Well, I'm like, given the timing of Cheney's death, maybe it's some kind of elaborate 9/11 tribute, like a Viking funeral. Maybe he was cremated on the plane, which was like remote controlled. You know how they would put the Vikings on the boat and shoot the flaming arrows at it? Like, I'm saying this is a nod to Cheney. It seems like that. And what would you expect? So let's just run down the list here. You've got UPS flight 2976. You got 2976 9/11 casualties. On the day Dick Cheney dies, like the Pentagon, it hits a building is hit. He's 84. I don't know what that means, but it's on 11-4. And then, of course, 4 dead, 11 injured. So 11-4, 411. Muhammad Ali Airport. Again, I think the Muhammad Atta is the lead hijacker from 9/11, like Muhammad attacks. And 175 seems like a reference to Flight 175. So I'm just saying there's some overlapping code here wrapped all around this event. And I posted a tweet about it as soon as I noticed this. And immediately what happened is it started kind of going, like right now it's got 36,000, 37,000 views. So it's getting a lot of hits. And a number of people are adding into it. Lilith says, they always have to go for the symbolism. I don't know. Is it them at this point, or is it just the simulation? So again, people see these manufactured coincidences, and their default position is we must be in a video game. Jason Trimble says the aliens are running shit. Deborah says, whoa, this is crazy. Dude says, what's wrong with your brain? Yeah, it's just my pattern recognizing monkey brain run amok once again. But if we were to just point out the flight number and the death toll, that's just a simple coincidence. But then you throw in Dick Cheney, then you throw in other elements like the fuel, the jet fuel, the massive explosion, the name Muhammad attached to it. I think it was going to Honolulu. Someone said that could be a Pearl Harbor reference or something. But the 411, 11-4, I'm looking at this as once, twice, three times coincidences. At some point, you got to say there's some intentionality here. So I'm thinking, well, could be simply nothing more than a remote controlled, purposeful demolition. And again, I'm saying this has got to have some Cheney connection. Now, I don't know what that is, other than it's just like, it almost seems like a tribute. It almost seems like a fiery tribute. I'm interested in your thoughts. Riley says 44 is a death number, they say. Yeah, I've heard that as well. And I just base it on context. So what is the context for that? Because you have various interpretations as far as numerology, but it adds to the word kill, I believe is what they say. Like K is 11, I is 9, and then L is, I think it should be 24. Yeah, that's what it is. They add up the letters. But anyway, at a minimum here, it looks like some kind of tribute to Dick Cheney. Very strange. 175 feet. Now that was, these are just the figures that they put out there, the numbers they put out there. Like we were talking about the baseball player yesterday, and like the baseball bat breaking in the hands of Kirk, who had previously been hit and had to walk off the field, and Alejandro Kirk being described as a pain in the neck, and the photograph seemed to suggest a fluid coming out of his neck. We see these things, and it's easy to say the aliens did it. It's easy to say that perhaps even we're in a simulation, because you're looking at things that don't have an explanation from within the world stage. So if you consider points of view, if your point of view is mainstream, then everything is a coincidence. Everything is a coincidence by default. That's the default position, because within the mainstream perspective, it's a closed informational system and doesn't include anything beyond coincidence as in intentionality. So from our perspective, we're more inclusive of other factors like real-time media synchronization between fake events and movies and all forms of subtle propaganda and marketing techniques, and these are sort of the same. So from our perspective, it has an explanation that goes beyond just the default, it's just a coincidence, which I think is sadly dismissive, because when you watch movies, you find a subtext. You wouldn't call that a coincidence. You would say that's some intentionally planted, subtle intrigue, deeper levels of meaning. This is consistent with all human art forms. So the idea that psyops or fake events wouldn't have this is a little off base, because we see plenty of examples of foreshadowing. We see a lot of irony. Even the media noticed the irony of the police training on a plane to combat stabbings, and the stabbing happens on the plane. We were just talking about the ironic headlines referencing the baseball player named Kirk and how they all seem to reference Charlie Kirk. I mean, really ironic at a minimum. So you could say that these are all coincidences, but they're just strangely ironic. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine with that. But what if I told you that strangely ironic coincidences are seemingly systemic, predictable, and part of the typical psyop? I mean, this is not a new thing. So again, we're talking about one of the architects of 9/11 on his death day. Fiery plane hits a building. The flight number lines up with the 9/11 victims. It alludes to the other events in a number of ways, specifically the part where it's hitting the building. But other than that, the timing of Cheney's death is probably one of the reasons why I looked at this one a little closer. So right now I'm just kind of crowdsourcing intel to see what people think about it. And since I posted the tweet, it has gone up to about 40,000 hits. So it's being consistently looked at and people are at least noticing. So you could say it's my hyperactive monkey brain doing its pattern recognizing thing. But when a lot of people start suggesting that I have a point here, whatever the interpretation, then I think maybe it's more than just some excessive use of my pattern recognizing skills. Lean Dion posted, breaking, suspects identified in Dearborn, Michigan terror plot, Muhammad Ali, stockpiling weapons for an ISIS-inspired attack. So if you look at the wider media ecosystem and all the stories out at the same time, you can kind of see how it coalesces into something. Again, I'm kind of thinking nod to Dick Cheney, some kind of a tribute. I don't know. I haven't seen any other agenda beyond this. I mean, maybe it's just completely coincidental. But I don't know. I find that a little too dismissive. Again, I'm just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or so significant clues here, which is why I'm saying it's 9/11 coded. All right, so we are live on Twitch, we are live on YouTube, and we are live on X. I'm working on a project here. I'm getting a remote server, OBS, everything set up so we can turn on archives and start getting phones again. So I'm going to run a test in the next couple of days. And what I think we're going to do is we're going to use my Chromebook on speakerphone to take calls. And it should be able to work. It's just a question of how, I guess, the quality of the audio. Ryla05 says, Cheney was perhaps one of the truly evil ones. Or he played one on TV. There was a movie called, was it called Vice? With Christian Bale. Yeah, from 2018, Vice. And Christian Bale looked exactly like him. I mean, if you want to talk about hyper-realistic masks, and this is like not CGI, I mean, this is something that you can wear. Yeah, it's pretty good as far as examples of what they can do with the technology. Now, another interesting thing, when they made the film Vice, Christian Bale was 44. The vice president was 77. And I think they share a birthday, but they're exactly 33 years apart. Bale underwent dramatic physical transformation for the role, which included extensive prosthetics to portray Cheney at different parts of his life. I remember looking into this closely because there was a period of time when we're looking at these masks and how he played Dick Cheney. Yeah, they're both born January 30th. I thought there was something kind of fishy about this because at the time, Mike Pence was just giving off these Christian Bale, like almost American Psycho era Christian Bale vibes. And I was noticing expression for expression, they seem to have the same face. So yeah, for a good amount of time there, I was convinced that Christian Bale not only played a vice president by wearing prosthetics in the movies, but that he played a vice president by wearing prosthetics in real life. American Father says, today is 54 days since 9/11. 54 is a special number to the Jesuits. Yeah, there are elements here when it comes to dates. So I'm wondering, what is the significance of 11/4 or 4/11? What is that? Because we know what they did with 9/11, with 3/11, and how they like to use these dates, and often birth dates. Birth dates are huge in the hoaxes. It's really kind of fascinating. We'll have to mind map this one out when we go into the birth dates of actors portraying presidents getting shot or assassins, like John Hinckley having JFK's birthday. It kind of tells a story in and of itself, their entrance and exit points. American Father says 33rd prime times 3 is 411. Right. Well, I'm suggesting, yeah, 411, 11/4. It's got to mean something. Just we have to think about this. But as of right now, just going through the major clues here, the big one is, again, 2976, Dick Cheney crashing into a building, plane just after taking off, full of fuel. HG says, I like your concept of fake. Yeah, I mean, fake is a very important concept. It's kind of how they fake you out into accepting a smuggled premise. So, for example, if they say, is there water on Mars? Or isn't there water on Mars? You know, you debate it, you talk about it, but to even have the conversation, you have to have accepted the premise that Mars exists as NASA advertises, and then you're, of course, talking about whether or not it has water. Well, what if the Mars program was fake? Well, then it means that the water discussion is irrelevant. It's fake. American Father says, try checking in on the channel called Number Games with Zachary Hubbard. Yeah, I used to follow Zachary Hubbard a bit. Our main point of disagreement is I think he believes the people in these psyops are dying for real. I mean, it's a minor point of contention, but I think it's highly significant. But I am interested in people's findings and their pattern recognition, because there's no doubt we're looking at patterns. We can debate as to the conclusions. I know he made a big deal about Event 201, which was the pre-pandemic simulation tabletop exercise where the elite basically play a board game like Risk and decide what to do to us. And at that Event 201, they had even talked about the rise of misinformation and anti-vaxxers. Like, the whole thing was scripted. But anyway, Hubbard's contention is that 201 is some kind of a calling card for the Jesuits. I'm not really someone who places much stock in the whodunit question, because it's a question that isn't going to have an answer. But I think the real question is, what is it? Let's all get on the same sheet as far as what it is. So, for example, it's a simulated version of reality in which they augment our daily news and therefore, over time, our history with things that didn't happen, things that don't exist. If we can all agree on that, we can proceed. And I think it's great, too, that, you know, you can listen to these various perspectives and then understand where they're coming from and still find value in what they're saying. A lot of my best research has come from people that have completely different worldviews than myself. So as long as you know their point of view, it doesn't really matter whether or not you agree, because it's about the facts. And the facts are pretty much things that we have to agree upon. Yes, the what is it question would be like, is it even real? Is it a psyop? Is it a false flag attack? So you have to make these distinctions, because if your starting point is it's a false flag, then your starting point includes the premise that people died. So with this plane thing, for example, given the 9/11 code around it, I'm inclined to say staged and fake, even if it means they destroyed a real plane and some real buildings. But if staged and fake, then we can also, I think, reasonably conclude that the number 411 is code, because the number 411 would then therefore have been arbitrarily picked. Like, oh, we're writing a script. How many people will be injured? So there's this 9/11 stuff around it, and then you throw in the 411, 11-4. It all just seems to reinforce the idea of intentionality. Again, the 2976 flight number and the 9/11 death toll number, that's too perfect given Dick Cheney. So having gone through these, what I consider to be hoax indicators of some kind of code or messaging, I think every aspect of it now needs to be looked at in that context. That's why I said the fact that they say it flew up 175 feet before crashing is easily a reference to Flight 175. And again, Muhammad Ali Airport, Muhammad Atta, the lead hijacker on 9/11. American Father says 411 is inverse 144. And one thing you can say about 9/11 is it was one of these events that, more than any other I think we've ever seen, was heavily coded in numerology and number symbolism. Like Flight 77 flies for 77 minutes, crashes into the 77-foot high Pentagon building. I got to double check some of these, but I think Building 7 fell after 7 hours into its footprint in 7 seconds. And then you had the 343 firemen who died supposedly, and then later 343 died of 9/11 lung. Well, 343 is of course 7 cubed, 7 times 7 times 7. So there's a bunch of the number stuff. Building 1, Building 2, Building 7, 127, kind of a Pearl Harbor-y reference there, 12-7. Then you got Shanksville, where the plane crashed and sort of disappeared. But Shanksville, the flight where they brought out the shanks, the let's roll, the box cutters. So that one was kind of curious to me. I guess you could throw in a lot of other stuff as well, with all of these. The Pentagon's construction, the groundbreaking ceremony was on 9/11, 1941. Muhammad Atta was 33, lead hijacker. What's up, Duets? Les. American Father says New York, 11th state, 9/11, flight 11, 11 crew, 111 days left in the year. Yeah, then you've got Neo from the Matrix with his magic passport. Well, his passport had 9/11 as the passport's expiration date. Is that what it was? And then I think there was a 3/11 on there but anyway, the passport's an interesting component here, just given how they identified the hijackers when the passports fell to the ground from the inferno into the hands of an FBI agent or something. I was saying before that if I was writing these scripts, I would have had Tyler Robinson drop his passport on the way to Dairy Queen, and that's how they caught him. Magic passport, made from the same stuff that Trump's ear is made out of, and Erica Kirk's heart, and Charlie Kirk's neck. Do you think Dick Cheney is in Valhalla or hell, says Angst G? I think Dick Cheney is likely in Valhalla, scuba diving, snorkeling with Charlie Kirk. And I would say so because given the hoax indicators, it's highly unlikely he died today. Like maybe he died a few months ago and they just have him on ice because they had this scheduled event. But I'm inclined to think that they exit the world stage in dramatic ways. You know, like for example, the Pope dying the same day, same age that the leader of the WEF steps down. So you got World Economic Forum 666, you got the Pope 666, world leaders of their respective organizations, one secular, one religious, and at the same time, they step off the stage. And then Trump puts two 88-foot high flag poles on either side of the White House. Like, what was that? Ollie Goering says, weird, Erica wore leather pants. Yeah, I think technically those were hot pants. And she wore them to impress J.D. Vance. He's no Charlie Kirk, but, as she said, he's really good and he's really articulate. And she really wants to run her hands through the back of his hair because that's normal. Like, don't criticize how she grieves. She's, you know, he's got his hands on her leather pants, and she has her arms, you know, coiling around his body like serpents, like all like serpentine. And she puts her hands through his hair, and they're like, that's just how she grieves. Don't criticize it. It's like, what are you guys talking about? They're gaslighting you. They're trolling you. They know the optics. And if you've been watching Hulu's The Tempest, you would have known this already. You would have known that the widow was part of the plot to take out the husband, take over his youth Christian Republican organization, fake cry on camera to win over the constituency, and that later she would be accused of faking her grief. That's the plot of The Tempest. And like The Tempest, Erica Kirk was called The Storm by Stephen Miller at Charlie's memorial. But what I'm pointing out here is that this is a contrivance. Her entire character is designed to make her political opponents and critics think she's got a thing for J.D. Vance. And immediately after the event, people were saying, wow, she's so dignified in her grief, she should be vice president under J.D. Vance. So VP Kirk has been memed for more than a month. And then you got the 2025 heads of state with Vice President Elizabeth Kirk, like E. Kirk, Elizabeth Kirk, Vice President Kirk. And it's the same damn actress that was the femme fatale blonde chick at the center of the conspiracy to kill Charlie Kirkland in Snake Eyes. Same actress. And the supposed TPUSA whistleblower comes out and talks about how Erica Kirk came in, brought in some shady people from the Mossad, and there was something going on, some Iron Dome, the Israeli missile defense. And they spun this conspiracy story, and I'm like, that's the exact same story of Snake Eyes. Ollie Goering says he would have thought a widow would wear something more comfortable to grieve in. Well, some people say it's not fair for us to criticize how she's grieving. Like, personally, I think she should be wearing a black veil for a year. Or maybe she should have thrown herself onto a fire. I mean, what are they supposed to do? Like, I get it. People grieve in their own ways. But you would be lying to yourself if you said it was completely normal for a grieving widow to do the WWE entrance with the fireworks, the roaring crowds. I mean, all of that was just over the top. And I would even say that even if Charlie Kirk was really killed, having his body autopsy, put back together, dressed, put in a coffin in less than 12 hours just to have a PR stunt so J.D. Vance could ride the coffin on 9/11. Like, that's gross, whether or not he's really dead. That's using a body as a PR stunt. American Father says Kirk equals church. Yes. And in The Tempest, the main character is shot on that part of his neck in a church in front of the youth Republicans. Interestingly, Charlie Kirk was there in South Korea where the film was made. He was there addressing the youth Republicans, and they prayed over him. So in other words, he went to the place where his predictive programming counterpart was in a movie, and he addressed the corresponding audience or crowd, and they prayed for him 4 days before he was really killed. Good One Day says, why in public? What are you referring to exactly? Are you talking about the grieving thing? Because in that TV show, the Tempest, the widow is told that if she's going to win over the voters, the constituency that belonged to her now dead husband, she was going to have to show vulnerability. And that if she could cry on camera, it would be her triple Axel moment. So at the end of, and that was episode 3, she manages to fake cry on TV and everybody cries. And I'm like, this is exactly what's happening in the real world right now. And it's been going on ever since then. It's been continuing to evolve because I said, wait a minute here. The mother-in-law seems to think that she had something to do with the death. So that's developing. And we saw that storyline developing. People were even calling Erica Kirk a Jezebel because of that country music video where she was shown with the tramp stamp, the number 910, saying, hey, Tyler, it was such a great shot at the video shoot today. We had a blast. And I was like, that's kind of funny because in the Snake Eyes, it takes place against the backdrop of Hurricane Jezebel. So Hurricane Jezebel, calling her a storm. She is called a storm. Tempest, the widow, is a storm. So the element of the storm is a repeated theme as well. HG says, if you've seen her Jesse Waters interview, you get a glimpse of what a horrible actor she is. She needs some lessons. Well, I think she got her start in reality TV. And she's also connected, this is like government, you're talking about PSYOPs. And the Government Actors Guild, the GAGs, they're just not as good as the SAGs because it's not a matter of talent. It's a matter of personal connections. You're in the right family. You have a security clearance. So the qualifications aren't really your skills as a thespian, but rather your security clearance that makes you useful to the system that employs liars or actors. But what's the difference? American Father says there was a hurricane on 9/11 outside New York, 500 miles wide, Hurricane Aaron. Wasn't there like a hurricane or a storm called Sandy Hook or something? What was that storm after Sandy Hook? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Hurricane Sandy, 2012. Tropical cyclone. New York City's nightmare hurricane. 147 deaths. I don't believe in weather weapons. I don't believe that chemtrails cause hurricanes. I don't think they're caused by anti-geoengineering. However, I think the media will turn a drizzle into a hurricane and blame Republicans and our over-reliance on fossil fuels if they can. Like you've seen that video where Anderson Cooper is like pretending like he's up to his waist in the water, but he's actually like kneeling in it. I mean, they're shameless. They will lean sideways 45 degrees while they're talking to the camera, like, I'm caught in a hurricane. And then you see some couple in the back walking their poodle, eating ice cream cones, like perfect weather behind them. But yeah, the lying about the weather is not new. Lying about anything isn't new. I mean, it's William Randolph Hearst said, you provide the photos, I'll provide the war. Fakeologist and I were talking about dummies. Like if you're not familiar with the dummy tanks of World War II, I recommend looking it up. Inflatable tanks. Then you have wooden surface-to-air missile launchers in Ukraine and Russia launching dummy missiles. Fake bases, fake cargo ships, wooden planes, things that fool cameras from afar. But now I think they do all of their dummies with CGI. I don't think they need to rely on inflatables. Who would want that MOS? Blowing up inflatable tanks all day. But my contention here is that they're not using these inflatable tanks to trick the Germans. They're not using these wooden missile launchers to scare the Russians. They're doing it for the photo ops. They're doing it to create the illusion to fool the masses. But decoys are standard operating procedure. And in 2020, it was like decoy testing centers, empty hospitals. All right, let's see here. Let's continue. We're talking about the 9/11 coding built into this UPS 2976, flight 2976, which is, again, the 9/11 death toll, Dick Cheney's death day. Is this some kind of celebration or some kind of ceremony, a send-off for Dick Cheney? Like, I was thinking Viking funeral. Did they put Cheney's coffin in that thing? Yeah, Lean Dion, the big inflatable plane that left Afghanistan when the troops bailed under Biden had 9/11 code all over it. Definitely connected. And yeah, it looked inflatable as heck. It all looks, that was one of the more ridiculous episodes. Very obvious. So let's go ahead and check right now. We're at 51,000. No, this can't be right. Well, I guess we've been live here for about 37 minutes. And yeah, it's gone up to 51,000 hits. We're talking about my tweet. If you go to my tweet, IPS Think Tank, I put all these points in a list here. So again, United Flights 175 was the second plane. It reached 175 feet. Muhammad Ali Airport. Dick Cheney's death seems to be some connection. 4 killed, 11 injured on 11/4. Seems like some more symbolism. Hitting the building. Nice touch. I don't know what to make of Dick Cheney's age being 84, if that has some significance. That number does have a great deal of significance to Jurassic Liars, who connects it with August 4th, which is the 216th day of the year and is also Obama's birthday. But I'm just putting a list down here. If you see anything else, by all means, chime in. Or if you think it's all just coincidence, I'm interested to hear that explanation. Angst G says, if you can see the fakery of Robbie Parker's press conference, you'll see through the Erica Kirk display. Yeah, I think these are equivalent. Well, no, I would say they're different. Because I don't think that Robbie Parker was deliberately trying to create this perception. Whereas I think Erica Kirk has been typecast as this Disney villainess, as this Jezebel witch, as this femme fatale at the center of a conspiracy. All the different roles that we see her corresponding characters are in, whether it's Snake Eyes, Heads of State, or The Tempest, it seems to be all of these create this perception that she was brought in order to take out Charlie at some point. That is the perception that's been created. And I'm saying it's a deliberate perception. So that when they have her going out there, like, yeah, smirk a little bit. Fake cry. Because the dupes are just going to continue to idolize and worship you, because the Christian nationalists are state olatrists these days. They worship the state. They worship Trump. And they want the reaction from the other side. Mango says lying demo. Yeah, I'd say the thing is, okay, you can say lying Democrats, but the truth of it is everybody existing with the mainstream perspective is sort of a liar at various to varying degrees. But it's a world of lies. It's the lie world order. And the Democrats are no more dishonest than the Republicans. And it's not a cliche, and I'm not just making a moral equivalency here. I'm saying they both exist in the same fictional universe. So you couldn't really claim that one is a worse liar than the other. Lean Dion says Erica's gaudy jewelry, especially the rings, play into her sketchy image. I like the memes that are coming out. I saw a meme of hers promoting a shampoo called No More Tears. Pretty funny. Like, honestly, the internet has just allowed the steam valve where people are saying ridiculous things, they're mocking it, and I think that's healthy. JRGMTY says no difference between Ayatollahs and radical Christians. The MAGA ban and the Taliban. What's the difference between somebody who's radicalized by Quran verses and somebody who's radicalized by QAnon verses? I mean, it was the QAnon people who ran up the Capitol. I think these are, in fact, equivalents by design. The MAGA ban. Oh, Vanilla ISIS. Was it? No, what is it? The base. So Al-Qaeda means the base. The white nationalist group with paramilitary training that has already plotted to black out the Pacific Northwest, they're called the base. It's the same, the base and the base. I would say the incel, that the radical Christian Groyper incel is the equivalent of the Islamic suicide bomber. One of them is going to martyr himself, sexually repressed, and he's going to attack Western women. And the other one's a terrorist. Like, they're doing the same thing. One of them's aiming for virgins in heaven. It's all stereotype. I don't believe these are real. But if you look at the concept of the incel and the suicide bomber and the terror cell, it's the same thing. It's all template. I even noticed this tendency among radical MAGA band types to really emphasize beards and this specific version of masculinity and the insistence on trad wives. They're all against feminism because they think, and they're also against, and I said this last week and Nick Fuentes even said it the next day, they're against the age of consent because they think that the age of consent is allowing the women to get away and go to college and not have babies and not be chained to the kitchen. So they're totally, again, their values are actually very much anti-Western. And like the Islamic terrorists, the MAGA ban also have a problem with the great Satan and with Hollywood and Western values. So they're in fact the same. And then I would even add further to this. You've got 9/11. We talked about Muhammad Atta, lead hijacker, 33 years old. 9/11, you have the external terror threat. Well, invert that. What is the inversion of it? 6/11. 6/11, I relate to the internal domestic threat. Starting with 6/11, that would be Timothy McVeigh's execution date. 6/11 is widely cited by white nationalists, and the Ephesians verse 6/11 about standing firm against the snares of the devil and putting on the armor of God. And 6/11 is the exact time that Trump was shot at, got his ear pierced at 6/11 and 33 seconds, which again, I'm saying it's a reference to McVeigh, executed at 6/11, 33 years of age. By the way, 84 days later, Trump goes back to Butler. So there's that number again. And at 6/11, they had a moment of silence. They made a big deal about that number. But the number 6/11 has been consistently associated with domestic violent extremists, with the far right, with the QAnon crowd. like Tim Ballard from Sound of Freedom with his Tim 611, Catholic pendant. But again, 611, 911, internal threat, external threat, Taliban, Magaban. These are manufactured threats, domestic and alien, but they're basically the same thing. They're very much parallel. Now, is there any other difference between the Ayatollahs and radical Christians? I would also say that they're both largely media constructs. I mean, there are real people who get caught up in this stuff, but for the most part, we're looking at like the bowl cut shooters, or now the newer shooters who are like Reddit radicalized, trans neo-Nazi satanic shooters. Yeah, these are just constructs. I want to go over that one again very soon. I want to go over this new shooter archetype and how it's built into the movie Weapons, how it ties into Tyler Robinson and his girlfriend being this activist Antifa, his trans girlfriend, and then the manifesto on his bullets. So that there's some pretty interesting examples here of how they construct these archetypes. And they went from neo-Nazi racist shooters to left-wing ideologues with these shootings at Christian students, Christian schools. So that's another element as well to look into, to examine here, because when it's the neo-Nazi shooters shooting public schools, the Republicans don't care, because public schools, they hate those, and the shooters on their side. But now that the shooters are coming from the left and they're shooting Christian children, now it has this entirely different spin, and it actually affects them. The movie Weapons, if you didn't know, Weapons pertains to the Annunciation school shooting. So the Annunciation school shooting was one of these template shooters, the satanic witch, redhead. The movie Weapons had a literal witch with red hair who was emptying out the classroom with magic, but basically the children disappeared at 2:17 a.m., with the exception of one child named Alex Lilly, obviously a reference to Adam Lanza. So the class is empty except for Adam Lanza, because the idea is he kills them all. So they built this up, but there's so many overlaps between the movie Weapons, the Annunciation shooting, and it all ties in to the characterization of the shooter of Charlie Kirk. Even the ironic question he was asked before he was shot, it all ties into this theme, though, of Weapons, the school shooting allegory. Kirk, ironically, in support of Weapons, agreeing that it's worth people dying as a sacrifice to preserve the right. But you also have these other elements in there as well. Specifically, again, these psyops are intended to target demographics. They'll target the left or the right. So the satanic Christian school shooter archetype that started with Audrey Hale is specifically frightening to the right, who've been conditioned on Pizzagate. Good One Day says, then everyone engraves bullets suddenly. Yeah, that started with Luigi Mangione, the engraving the manifesto on the bullets. And I have a serious question about that, which is crime scene evidence being put into the breaking news stories. Like, is this really a crime scene, or is it a movie scene? You watch a movie about a crime and you're seeing it from the view of the detective. You're seeing the evidence, you're seeing how it happened. But in real life, crime scenes, eyewitnesses, they're kind of not just thrown out there in front of everybody. But here's another element too. If you haven't seen Weapons, so Weapons and the Annunciation school shooting have a lot of connections. Weapons is all about the number 217, a reference to 217 votes against the assault weapons. And Annunciation, it was said 2 people died, 17 injured. So we're looking at this 217 connection between these 2 events already. That was kind of the obvious thing. But the more we look into these 2 things, you find there's a lot of deliberate parallels, like in the imagery. The movie poster looks like the parents running to the school. Had to be deliberate. Then there's the theme of the children was pretty big, where the movie Weapons is narrated by a child. As in, it's a child telling you about this horrible thing that happened at the school. And when you watch the Annunciation school shooting, it's all told to you from the perspective of a child crisis actors. You have some like 5-year-old is talking about how his best friend got shot and died on top of him. Like, this little kid witnessed a massacre and you're going to put him on TV and all kinds of people are around recording him with their iPhones. Like, no, he's just this child star, basically, in the world of crisis actors. But again, the psyop that related to the movie, like the movie, was quite literally narrated by a child. Curtifest says, I laughed when I heard Trump's going to attack a country that's killing Christians, yet he's starving millions of Christians in his own country. Yeah, this is all class warfare. It's designed to look like that. Like, he's having this lavish party based on The Great Gatsby. And it's, if you haven't seen the footage, it's like that part in Back to the Future where Biff Tannen's taken over. So you have this Caligula-like display, these dancers who are, just strippers in these big martini glasses. But anyway, I'm not shocked by any of it. But these are the same people who are shocked by every Super Bowl performance. They're shocked by everything on the movie awards, and yet they're cool with this. So people are looking at this. They're looking at Trump rebuilding the ballroom, knocking down parts of the building, remodeling the Lincoln bathroom. So you have these expenditures of money, and at the same time, they're like, oh, if you're on food stamps, no Thanksgiving for you. 42 million people not going to eat for Thanksgiving. Now, I don't think it's going to play out that way. Not every state handles it the same. There's contingencies, there's food kitchens or whatever. I don't think it's that bad, and I don't think it's going to drag on that long. But they create this perception. It's all class war, which, does tie in to Luigi Mangione and the No Kings protest. But this idea of Trump sending soldiers out to wherever to stop people from killing Christians, it's just theater. It's no different than when he said he was going to stop the white genocide in South Africa, and he started bringing over some Afrikaans from some kind of group of immigrants, like he was saving them from a genocide. It's all just pandering. It's all form, no substance. A lot of people are saying there's going to be all kinds of food riots and people are going to go riot because they don't have. I don't think that's the case. I think it's too cold. All right, let's see what else we have going on here. We've got 47 people here on YouTube, a few on Twitch, quite a few on Twitter. I want to do one more check here on my tweet. Again, this is early. When you have an event like this, we don't have all the facts. But the facts that are available are decidedly in the favor of this event being 9/11 coded. And if it has some kind of code, some theme, a subtext, some meaningful coincidences piled up on top of other meaningful coincidences, then it's likely a hoax. So I'm going back to my tweet. Again, we're talking about UPS flight 2976. The 9/11 attacks killed 2976. So this immediate 9/11 connection in the same news cycle as Dick Cheney dying. I mean, come on. Now, when I said that I suspected that this is some kind of 9/11 tribute shout out and he got a Viking funeral and he was cremated in that plane, like, I don't know if that's true. I just think I would like it to be true. Like, I think that's the kind of send off you would expect. But anyway, this has been fun. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow. It could just be a coincidence, but I thought we should probably bring this up and just see what other people think about the matter. We're talking about essentially a story, a contemporary myth. If you're not on the Discord server, the link's at ips.monster. We have a lot of activity in there. We've been talking about actually hiring somebody in the realm of special effects to perhaps demonstrate, and obviously we'd have to pay for it, but I'd say let's have a demonstration of a squib. Like, we've had a lot of conversations about, is it squib, is it CGI, and it goes back and forth, and I think ultimately this is going to be solved when we try a squib out for ourselves. That's kind of where we have to go with this, because another video has come out, and this video seems to show what appears to be blood all over these guys' hands who are handling the body. But originally the take was that no, he was in fact, their hands were in fact not bloodied. And so there's this contention. And I think that's what happens when you have bad footage and then you transition to new footage a few weeks later, and like the new footage shows something different. So it also is another reason why you kind of have to wait for a little while, because the immediate takes are likely to be wrong or have some kind of errors. And I think there's a strategy here involved where they leave you with bad footage, they let you run to erroneous conclusions, and then they correct it later so they can pose as the more authoritative sources. But anyway, we'll continue this tomorrow. I'm going to test out the phones and the audio here, and hopefully we can start taking phones, open phones in the evenings, maybe as